Ethan Williams stood by the window of his luxurious penthouse, his eyes gazing at the sparkling lights stretching across the New York City skyline. To the outside world, he was the epitome of success, the CEO of TechWave, the tech empire that made him a billionaire before the age of 40. His life was filled with luxury, expensive tailored suits, private jet flights, and extravagant parties with the elite. But deep inside, he felt an emptiness that nothing could fill. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know where you're watching us from in the comments below. Emma, his wife, had been by his side since the toughest of times. They built everything together from scratch. When Ethan was just a young man chasing a startup dream with a worn-out laptop, Emma worked tirelessly as a pediatrician at a hospital, using every penny she earned to support him. They once lived in a cramped apartment, ate modest dinners from a nearby diner, and nurtured their dreams with love and perseverance. She always believed in Ethan, even when he failed and doubted himself. She encouraged him to get back up and keep pursuing his grand vision. Eventually, TechWave became a monumental success, turning Ethan from a nobody into a powerful and wealthy man. But with success came change. Ethan couldn't remember exactly when he started dreading going home. Maybe it began with the dwindling conversations, the indifferent hugs, and the solitary dinners because Emma was working night shifts at the hospital. She remained dedicated to saving children's lives, despite having the option to work at a private hospital for a higher salary. Emma always believed that real change started within the community, from the under-resourced public hospitals. She chose a path of dedication and service, while Ethan became absorbed in a world of power and prestige. He came home every night in his perfectly tailored suit, sometimes exhausted from million-dollar meetings. Meanwhile, Emma returned wearing her white lab coat smelling of antiseptic, weary after long emergency shifts. They still loved each other, but it was a tired kind of love, like a candle slowly burning out. They lived together but no longer felt like they belonged to each other. Then Isabella appeared, like an unexpected storm crashing into Ethan's familiar life. She was a young, beautiful model he met at a glamorous charity gala. Her eyes sparkled, her smile was captivating, and most importantly, she looked at Ethan, not as a powerful billionaire but as a man. For a fleeting moment, Ethan felt alive again. He felt desired, seen, not for his wealth or status, but for who he truly was. The affair didn't begin instantly. It started with secret glances, prolonged conversations, and flirtatious words. Gradually, they began meeting outside of the parties, away from prying eyes. The thrill of secrecy made Ethan feel young again. Then, one fateful night, Isabella placed her hand on his, her eyes filled with temptation. It was the first time, and also the first betrayal. But once the guilt faded, Ethan realized he no longer belonged to Emma. His heart now belonged to Isabella, the woman who had rekindled the passion he thought was lost. Ethan was never one to hesitate once he made a decision. And this time was no different. He knew he couldn't continue living a lie. Emma deserved honesty, even if the truth would break her heart. On their wedding anniversary, as Emma carefully prepared dinner and arranged candles on the dining table, Ethan walked in holding divorce papers. His heart was heavy, but his face remained cold and resolute. Emma looked at him with gentle eyes, the same way she did the first time they met. When she saw the divorce papers, she was stunned but quickly regained her composure. She didn't cry, scream, or beg him to stay. There was only silence and a profound sadness in her eyes. After a long, unbearable pause, Emma softly said, "I understand." No blame, no tears. She took the pen and signed her name, then quietly walked out of the room, leaving Ethan standing alone in the house they once called home. The next day, Ethan moved into his new apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering New York City skyline. There were no traces of the past, no memories of a broken marriage. Isabella quickly filled the void with her charm and the excitement of a new love untouched by time. But in the long, silent nights, as the city lights flickered below, Ethan found himself thinking about Emma. It wasn't longing, but an emptiness and regret. He wondered if he had made a mistake. Was the success and fame worth losing the love that once meant everything to him? Unbeknownst to him, across the city, Emma sat quietly in a dark room, staring at an ultrasound screen with astonishment. She was carrying not just one but 4 tiny lives, 4 hearts beating inside her. A new chapter was beginning, not just for Ethan but also for Emma and the children he never knew existed. After Ethan left, the house suddenly became unbearably empty. Emma felt as if all sound had vanished, leaving only a cold, haunting silence that crept into every corner. She tried to maintain her daily routine, convincing herself that she would be okay, that she was stronger than she realized. But her body began to betray her. Emma felt exhausted, inexplicably drained. She blamed it on the stress of the divorce, the sleepless nights, and the silent tears soaked into her pillow. She thought she just needed rest, that everything would eventually pass. Then the nausea hit. At first, it was mild dizziness, but it grew more intense, forcing her to rush to the bathroom, vomiting uncontrollably. Emma tried to brush it off, convincing herself that it was just stress and work pressure. Until she realized that she was nearly 2 months late. Doubt slowly turned to worry as the symptoms became more pronounced. Finally, she decided to see a doctor, thinking it was just hormonal imbalance from stress. But deep down, Emma felt that something was changing. The small clinic was eerily quiet. Emma sat on the examination bed, her cold hands clenched tightly together as she waited for the results. The antiseptic smell filled her nostrils, reminding her of the exhausting days at the hospital where she helped countless children, never imagining that she would be here, under these circumstances. The door creaked open, and the doctor walked in with a gentle but cautious expression. "Emma, I have the results." Her voice was warm yet laced with something unspoken. Emma felt her heart race. She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I'm pregnant, aren't I?" The doctor nodded, her eyes filled with sympathy. "Yes. And it's not just one, there are 4. Time seemed to freeze. Emma felt the air leave the room. She stared at the ultrasound screen, where 4 tiny hearts were beating in unison. 4 babies? Her voice broke, almost unable to believe her ears. The doctor sat beside her, gently explaining. "Yes, it's quadruplets. It's rare but completely possible. They are currently developing healthily and steadily. But carrying quadruplets comes with significant challenges and risks. I want you to be prepared for the journey ahead." Emma nodded absent-mindedly, her eyes never leaving the ultrasound screen. 4 tiny lives growing inside her, 4 hearts beating in harmony. A wave of astonishment and fear overwhelmed her. She had always dreamed of having children, but not like this. Not when Ethan had abandoned her to pursue another life. On the way home, thoughts flooded her mind, making her head throb. Emma didn't know what to do or say. She wanted to call Ethan, to scream that he had abandoned not just her but also their 4 unborn children. But then, the image of Ethan and Isabella hand in hand on the magazine cover flashed in her mind. He had left her, chosen his life, and decided to walk away to seek his own happiness. Emma sank into the chair in the empty living room, her hands resting on her belly, where the tiny lives were growing day by day. She felt the bond forming, an unbreakable connection. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she realized that she would have to face everything alone. She thought about calling Ethan, telling him the truth. But then she wondered, how would he react? Would he come back out of responsibility, out of duty, or out of real love? And if he returned only out of obligation, how would these children grow up in an incomplete family? No, she couldn't let her children become victims of this bitter breakup. She wouldn't force Ethan to stay just because of the unexpected arrival of 4 babies. She wouldn't let them become pawns in his game of power and fame. Emma wiped her tears, her gaze becoming more determined. She knew she had to be strong, to face reality. She would raise them with all the love and strength she had, even if it meant doing it all on her own. The small house became warmer as Emma began preparing for the life ahead. She quietly bought baby supplies, decorated the tiny room into a colorful nursery. She learned to cope with severe morning sickness, feeling every first kick and every tiny movement inside her. She enrolled in prenatal classes, mentally preparing herself to be a single mother to 4 babies. Each passing day, she grew more attached to them, loving them even more. Beside her bed, the divorce papers still lay on the table. She had signed them but hadn't sent them yet. She knew she needed to end the past to start a new journey. Emma picked up the pen, staring at the paper. She was no longer the fragile woman she was yesterday. She was now a mother ready to do anything to protect her children. She signed her name one last time, put the pen down, and softly whispered, "We will be strong, I promise." No one could have known that her decision today would change the lives of not just 1 but 5 people forever. Time passed, day by day, month by month, and Emma's belly grew larger. She felt every kick, every tiny movement from the 4 lives growing inside her. Each sensation filled her with joy, mixed with a deep sense of worry. Carrying quadruplets was no easy feat. The fatigue, back pain, and physical strain often left her sleepless at night. She had to take maternity leave earlier than expected, transitioning to remote office work to allow herself more rest and preparation time. But Emma refused to let herself be weak. She steadfastly organized everything on her own, setting up cribs, buying newborn clothes, and even preparing tiny socks. Every day, she reminded herself that she was no longer living just for herself, but had to be strong for the 4 children growing within her. The day finally arrived. Emma was rushed to the hospital, overwhelmed by excruciating labor pains. The doctors were well prepared, fully aware that this would be a challenging and risky delivery. She clutched the nurse's hand tightly, sweat pouring down her forehead as wave after wave of pain surged through her. After hours of battling between life and death, the first cry echoed through the room, followed by 3 more cries in quick succession. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she gazed at her children for the first time. 4 tiny faces, pink and delicate, nestled in her arms. Her heart overflowed with happiness as tears streamed down her cheeks. She whispered through exhausted but loving breaths, "Welcome to the world, Liam, Noah, Ava, and Mia." She had chosen their names long ago, lying on the hospital bed with her hand on her belly, dreaming of their future. Each name carried special meaning. Liam, the firstborn, a strong leader who would always protect his siblings. Noah, curious and intelligent, destined to explore the world around him. Ava, playful and full of energy, bringing joy and laughter to everyone. Mia, the gentle and sensitive youngest, always attuned to the emotions of those around her. Emma kissed each child's forehead, whispering prayers for their happiness and well-being. In that moment, she knew she had found the purpose of her life. The early days of being a single mother to quadruplets were nothing short of a nightmare. Emma had to learn how to cope with constant exhaustion, sleepless nights, and the chaos that 4 newborns brought into her life. Cries echoed endlessly, one after another, forming a never-ending symphony of chaos. She had to learn how to breastfeed them simultaneously, change diapers, rock them to sleep, and calm them when they cried. Just as one would fall asleep, the other 3 would wake up, creating an endless cycle. There were nights when she was so exhausted that she broke down in tears, but she would quickly wipe them away, reminding herself to stay strong for her children. There was no one to share the burden with, no one to lean on when she was overwhelmed. Emma became more independent than ever. She gave up personal hobbies, forgot about social gatherings, and even sacrificed peaceful, long sleeps. She became both mother and father, protector and unconditional love. Emma's small apartment gradually transformed into a warm, colorful home. She decorated the nursery with pictures of cute teddy bears, adorable toys, and tiny strollers. The walls were adorned with framed photos of her 4 children, their innocent smiles and curious, round eyes bringing life to the room. Each day, Emma discovered something new and delightful about her children. Liam always protected his siblings, willingly sharing toys and caring for them with the instincts of a big brother. Noah was fascinated with exploration, constantly trying to take apart everything around him to understand how things worked. Ava was mischievous and quick-witted, often leading games filled with laughter. Mia remained quiet and observant but was incredibly sensitive, knowing exactly how to comfort her mother when she was tired. These 4 children were not only Emma's babies but also her little companions, angels who brought joy and hope into her life. Looking back on her journey, Emma was astonished by her own strength. She had overcome the pain of betrayal, the exhaustion of sleepless nights, and the loneliness of being a single mother. She had turned pain into strength and difficulties into motivation to live for her children. Emma knew the road ahead would not be easy, and she would face many more challenges. But she also knew that she was never truly alone. 4 tiny hearts beat strongly beside her, 4 lives that had given her purpose and meaning. She smiled, her eyes sparkling with hope as she watched her children play in front of her. Emma knew she had made the right decision to raise them on her own, choosing a difficult but love-filled path. Her love was enough. Her strength was enough. And her heart was full. 5 years had passed since Ethan walked out of Emma's life. His world seemed perfect beside Isabella, the young and stunning model. TechWave continued to soar, bringing him limitless fame and power. He attended countless social events and glamorous galas where people connected not just for business but also for influence and reputation. That night was no different. Ethan arrived at an exclusive charity gala, where entrepreneurs and celebrities gathered to flaunt their wealth and generosity. Isabella proudly held his arm, her radiant smile dazzling under the glistening lights. She shone like a star, drawing all eyes to them. In that moment of pride and glory, Ethan had no idea that his life was about to change forever. The evening was filled with elegance and grandeur. As the main event of the gala began, the host announced a special performance by a children's choir. Ethan sipped his wine indifferently, his eyes idly watching the stage without much interest. But when the children stepped onto the stage, his heart stopped. 4 children stood side by side in cute matching uniforms, their eyes bright and innocent, their smiles pure. They had soft brown hair, sharp eyes, and straight noses, the same features Ethan saw every day in the mirror. He held his breath, his eyes widening in shock as he noticed the uncanny resemblance. They didn't just look like him, they looked identical to each other in a way that was unmistakable. Ethan felt like he was seeing miniature versions of himself on stage. His heart raced, his mind spinning as he tried to find a logical explanation. The chaotic thoughts drowned out the angelic singing of the choir. All he knew was that he needed to find out the truth. Noticing his unusual reaction, Isabella asked worriedly, "Are you okay?" Ethan didn't respond, his eyes still fixed on the stage. He murmured, almost in disbelief, "It can't be. They look so much like me." As soon as the performance ended, Ethan swiftly left the table, ignoring Isabella's worried calls behind him. He followed the children, his eyes never leaving them for a second. His heart sank as he saw a woman step out from the audience, bending down with a gentle smile to greet the children. Emma. She looked so different, her long hair neatly tied up, her face more refined yet mature, her eyes still gentle but shadowed with a trace of sadness. Time seemed to stand still. Memories flooded back, sleepless nights together when TechWave was just an idea, the moment he handed her the divorce papers, and how he walked away without looking back. He watched as Emma adjusted their clothes tenderly, her eyes overflowing with love. She smiled as they excitedly chattered about their performance, her eyes gleaming with pride. Ethan's heart sank as realization hit him like a tidal wave. They were his children. Unable to hold back any longer, Ethan rushed forward, his voice trembling as he called out, "Emma!" Emma turned around, her eyes widening in shock at the sight of Ethan. She stood frozen for a few seconds before regaining her composure, her gaze turning cold and distant. "Ethan! What are you doing here?" Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry. He looked at each child and then back at her, his voice shaking. They're my children, aren't they?" Emma stayed silent, her eyes wavering before they hardened with resolve. She gave a slight nod. "Yes. They're your children. Liam, Noah, Ava, and Mia." The world collapsed beneath Ethan's feet. He felt like he couldn't breathe as he stared at the 4 innocent faces in front of him. They were his children, his flesh and blood, a part of a life he had left behind. He choked out, his voice filled with pain. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you hide them from me all these years? Emma looked him straight in the eyes, her voice cold but laced with sorrow. You abandoned me the day you handed me those divorce papers. You chose your life, chose Isabella, chose fame and wealth. I wasn't going to beg you to stay, and I certainly wasn't going to let our children grow up with a father who was only there out of obligation. Ethan stepped back, feeling as if he'd been punched in the chest. He had never thought of it that way. In his eyes, the marriage had ended when the love faded. But he had never considered that Emma would have to raise 4 children on her own. Emma turned away, gripping her children's hands tightly, her eyes resolute. They don't need you, Ethan. I've raised them with all the love I have. They don't need to know who you are, and they certainly don't need to see a father who never wanted to be there. With that, she walked away, the children obediently following behind her. Ethan stood motionless, his eyes burning as he watched the small yet strong figure of Emma walking away. The 4 children never looked back at him, as if he never existed in their world. Ethan felt his heart shatter, realizing for the first time in his life that he had lost the most important thing of all, a family he never knew he had. Ethan returned to his luxurious penthouse, a place that once symbolized pride and success. But now, it felt cold, empty, and soulless. He sank into the expensive sofa, his eyes staring blankly into the void. The 4 innocent faces and bright eyes haunted him relentlessly. They looked so much like him, like reflections of his past. The soft brown hair, the sharp eyes, even the way they furrowed their brows when thinking, all of it was a part of him. He had missed the most important years of their lives. He wasn't there when they took their first breaths, when they took their first steps, or when they said, "Mama," for the first time. He missed all those precious moments because of his selfishness and ambition. Isabella entered the room, her face filled with concern as she noticed his distant expression. She gently asked, "What's wrong? Did something happen at the gala?" Ethan didn't answer immediately, his eyes distant and unfocused. Finally, he sighed, his voice hoarse. "I have 4 children." Isabella's face went pale, her eyes wide with shock. "What? What are you talking about?" Ethan looked into her eyes, guilt and pain flooding his heart. "They're mine, with Emma. 4 children, they're my kids." Isabella stepped back, her hands trembling as she covered her mouth. She had never imagined that Ethan's past would come back so vividly, so powerfully. Ethan stood up, his eyes determined. "I have to do something. I can't abandon them like I abandoned their mother." In the days that followed, Ethan tried to contact Emma, but she ignored all his calls and messages. He drove to her house multiple times, but was met with cold silence and a locked door. He didn't give up. He spent time learning about the 4 children and the life they were living. He hired a private investigator to observe them from afar, not to intrude but to understand how they lived, where they studied, and what they liked. Ethan realized that Emma had done an extraordinary job. She had raised them beautifully, turning her small house into a warm, loving home. He watched Liam, the eldest, always acting mature and protective of his siblings. The boy had sharp eyes just like him, but was gentle and caring like his mother. Noah, curious and intelligent, constantly tinkering with toys, eager to understand how things worked. Ava, playful and energetic, always the first to initiate daring games, never stopping her infectious laughter. Mia, the quiet and sensitive youngest, always attuned to others' emotions, bringing comfort to those around her. Ethan felt a deep love for them but also an overwhelming pain as he realized how many precious moments he had missed. He resolved to do whatever it took to make up for the lost time, to become a part of their lives. One rainy afternoon, Ethan stood outside the elementary school where his children studied. He watched as Emma walked out, holding Nia's hand while the other 3 laughed and played beside her. He approached them, his voice trembling. "Emma, we need to talk." Emma looked at him, her eyes cold but shadowed with lingering pain. She gripped Mia's hand tightly and turned away, saying curtly, "They don't need you, Ethan." Her words pierced his heart, but he stood his ground. He knelt down to meet the children's eyes, smiling gently. "Hi. I'm Ethan. Can I be your friend? The children looked at each other confused, then turned to Emma for an explanation. Emma hesitated, her eyes softening as she saw the sincerity in Ethan's gaze. Liam stepped forward, his sharp eyes scrutinizing Ethan. Who are you? Why do you want to be our friend? Ethan smiled, his voice tender but filled with pain. Because I want to know you. I want to be there and share moments of your life. Emma's grip tightened, her eyes red as she witnessed the truth in Ethan's eyes. She knew he was trying, that he was genuinely remorseful and wanted to make amends. But her heart had been shattered once. Could she be strong enough to forgive him and give him a second chance? Could she let Ethan into her children's lives after so many years of absence? After a long silence, Emma took a deep breath, her voice hoarse with emotion. All right, Ethan. You can meet them, but only as a friend. No grand gestures, no sudden claims of fatherhood. You will have to prove that you genuinely want to be a part of their lives because of love, not obligation. Ethan nodded, his eyes brightening with hope. I promise. I'll do whatever it takes to be there for them, no matter how long it takes. Emma looked at him one last time before turning away, her 4 children surrounding her like little angels protecting her wounded heart. Ethan stood there, his heart heavy but filled with hope. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that he would have to fight to regain Emma's trust and his children's love. But he was ready. Because family was the most precious thing he never knew he had. Ethan felt an unusual nervousness as he walked into the park where Emma had arranged for him to meet his 4 children. His heart pounded as he saw them playing on the lush green grass, their laughter echoing joyfully through the air. Emma stood nearby, her graceful figure radiating calmness as she watched over them protectively. She glanced at Ethan, her eyes cautious and resolute, silently reminding him that he was still an outsider in the children's world. Ethan took a deep breath and walked slowly towards them. Liam, the eldest, noticed his presence immediately. His sharp eyes, so much like Ethan's, studied him with curiosity and caution. Who are you? Liam asked, his voice steady and mature beyond his years. Ethan smiled, crouching down to meet their eye level. I'm Ethan. I'm a friend of your mom. I'd like to get to know you and play with you today. Would that be okay? Noah's eyes lit up with curiosity, jumping up excitedly. Do you know how to do puzzles? I have a really tough one that no one can solve. Ethan laughed, feeling a wave of relief wash over him as he saw Noah's enthusiasm. He nodded. I'm pretty good at puzzles. How about we see who can solve it faster? Noah squealed with delight, pulling Ethan towards the colorful puzzle set. Ava quickly joined the challenge, her eyes sparkling with joy. Mia, the quietest of the 4, stood still, her big round eyes watching Ethan intently but saying nothing. Only Liam remained standing apart, his eyes never leaving Ethan, as if evaluating whether he could be trusted. The meetings that followed were always cautious and slow, just as Emma had set out. Ethan never showed up unannounced, never brought expensive gifts, and never tried to impress them with his wealth. He understood that love couldn't be bought, and if he wanted to earn their trust, he had to be patient and genuine. He spent more and more time playing with them, joining in their favorite activities. He helped Noah assemble complex models, taught Ava how to play soccer, patiently listened to Mia read books, and tended to Emma's garden with Liam. Liam remained distant, never as warm as the others. He observed every move Ethan made, sometimes asking deep questions that left Ethan speechless. Mom says adults make promises, but they don't always keep them. Are you one of those people? Liam asked one day as they watered the garden together. Ethan felt a pang of guilt but looked directly into Liam's honest eyes and answered sincerely. I used to be, Liam. But now, I want to change. I want to keep my promises to you and your mom. I won't leave you again. Liam said nothing, but his eyes softened slightly, showing less caution than before. On a beautiful autumn afternoon, Ethan took the children on a picnic at the lakeside park. Golden leaves scattered on the green grass, creating a magical fairy tale-like setting. The children ran around excitedly, laughing and playing as they flew kites together. Ava ran to him, grabbing his hand. "Uncle Ethan, can you help me fly the kite higher?" Ethan smiled, taking the string in his hand and running alongside Ava across the field. Their laughter echoed in the crisp autumn air. Mia sat beside Emma, her eyes sparkling as she watched the kite soar high in the blue sky. After flying the kite, the children gathered around him, begging him to tell a story. Ethan hesitated before deciding to share memories of his childhood, of sneaking away to fly kites with his grandfather in the countryside. He spoke with genuine emotion, not hiding his mischievousness or the times he was scolded for breaking kite strings. Liam listened quietly, his eyes softening as he saw a different side of Ethan, not the distant billionaire but a man who once had a childhood just like his. When the story ended, Liam quietly said, "I wish I could fly kites with my grandfather, but I've never met him. Can you take me to meet him?" Ethan was stunned, his eyes stinging with tears. He took Liam's hand, his voice trembling. "I will, Liam. I promise." It was the first time Liam called him uncle, without hesitation or distance. As time passed, Ethan's patience and sincerity gradually paid off. The children grew more comfortable around him, sharing more about their lives. Noah proudly showed him complex models he built and eagerly awaited Ethan's guidance. Ava often invited him to play tag and hugged him tightly whenever she won. Mia began sitting closer to him, gently resting her head on his shoulder during story time. Liam maintained his mature demeanor but started asking Ethan deeper questions, especially about his childhood and family. Ethan felt his heart melt as he experienced their unconditional love and innocent trust. He realized he didn't need to be a perfect father, he just needed to be there, to be genuine, and to always stay by their side. He had finally found his place in their lives, not as a stranger or a distant figure, but as someone who truly cared. For the first time in his life, Ethan understood the true meaning of family, love, and redemption. Ethan had gradually become a part of his children's lives. The picnics, the simple games, and even the bedtime stories had helped him build a closer bond with them. Noah's laughter, Ava's spontaneous hugs, Mia's trusting eyes, and Liam's maturity became the motivation that kept Ethan going on his journey of redemption. But his relationship with Emma remained distant. She was always polite and composed whenever they met, but her eyes were still cold and guarded. Ethan understood that Emma had not yet forgiven him, and that the past between them was far from resolved. One cold winter afternoon, Ethan decided to confront the past. He invited Emma to meet him, not at the park or the children's school but at the old cafe where they used to date in their youth. Emma walked into the cafe with an air of confidence and composure. She sat down across from Ethan, her gaze calm but distant. "What do you want to talk about?" Her voice was steady but emotionally detached. Ethan was silent for a long time, trying to organize his thoughts. He knew that if he wanted Emma's forgiveness, he had to speak the truth and confront all his mistakes. "I'm sorry," Ethan began, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry for abandoning you, for not being there when you needed me the most. I was selfish and only thought about myself." Emma remained silent, her eyes flickering with emotion before regaining their cold composure. "Do you know how I felt that day, Ethan? You walked out on me on our anniversary. You handed me the divorce papers while I was preparing a special dinner, believing that we still had a chance to fix things." Her voice choked with emotion, her eyes red but determined. "I waited for you to explain, to change your mind. But you never came back. You chose Isabella, chose a lavish life, and left me alone, with 4 children you didn't even know existed." Ethan felt his heart shatter. He never realized how deeply he had hurt Emma. He had been so consumed by ambition and wealth that he forgot about the woman who had stood by him through thick and thin. "I was wrong, Emma. I was blind and selfish. I thought I deserved happiness without realizing that I was losing the most precious thing, my own family." Emma took a deep breath, her eyes filled with tears but her voice firm. "Do you know how it felt when I found out I was pregnant? I sat alone in an empty room, staring at the ultrasound screen showing 4 tiny hearts beating inside me. I thought about calling you but wondered if you would come back out of love or just out of obligation. Ethan lowered his head, his voice breaking. I didn't know what you went through, Emma. But please give me a chance to make things right. I want to be there for our children, to be the father they deserve. Emma closed her eyes, her shoulders shaking as she tried to control the emotions that had been building up for years. She had been strong alone, raising 4 children with love and resilience. She had built a life without Ethan and convinced herself that she didn't need him. But the truth was, her heart still ached every time she looked into Liam's eyes, every time she saw Noah's smile, heard Ava's laughter, and felt Mia's sensitivity. They all carried a part of Ethan, living proof of the love they once shared. After a long, agonizing silence, Emma opened her eyes and looked directly at Ethan. You want to be a part of their lives, but you need to do it genuinely. You need to prove that you love them, not out of guilt or obligation but because they're a part of you. Ethan nodded, his eyes shining with hope. I promise, Emma. I will do everything I can to make up for what I missed. I'll be patient and won't force anything. I'll become the father they need. Emma sighed, her voice gentle but firm. I'll give you a chance, Ethan. But if you hurt them, even once, I will never forgive you. Ethan's voice quivered with emotion. I understand. I won't let you down again. Emma stood up, turning to leave but then stopped, her voice soft. They don't know who you are yet. I want to give them more time, and to give you time too. Ethan smiled, his eyes warm as he watched Emma's strong figure walk away. Thank you, Emma. Thank you for giving me a chance to be a father again. Emma didn't reply, but in her fleeting glance, Ethan saw a glimmer of hope. That day, Ethan felt a weight lifted off his heart. He knew that his journey of redemption had only just begun and that the road ahead would be challenging. But he was willing to face every difficulty to regain Emma's trust and his children's love. He had lost too much because of his selfishness and ambition. Now, he only wished to rebuild the family he had abandoned. And this time, he wouldn't give up. After the truth was revealed, Ethan and Emma's lives slowly began to change. Although the wounds of the past hadn't fully healed, they started finding ways to mend and build a better life for their 4 children. Ethan spent more time with his children, not just as a father who showed up for picnics but as a friend, a teacher who taught them valuable life lessons. He explored complex science models with Noah, played soccer with Ava, patiently read books with Mia, and stood by Liam through every challenge. Their family bond grew stronger through patience and sincerity. Ethan learned to love and care for his children without the need for luxury or material possessions. But the relationship between him and Emma remained distant. Emma kept her emotional guard up, unwilling to let herself become vulnerable again. One beautiful autumn evening, as golden leaves blanketed the small road in front of her house, Emma received an unexpected invitation from Ethan. He wanted her to join him at the children's music recital at school. She agreed, and as she entered the auditorium, her heart stirred when she saw Ethan sitting in the front row, his eyes filled with pride and love. The children stood on stage, their faces glowing with joy as they saw both their parents there together. Throughout the performance, Emma couldn't take her eyes off Ethan. She saw a different man, a father full of responsibility and love, no longer the selfish and ambitious man from the past. After the recital, as the children ran to hug them both, Ethan looked directly into Emma's eyes, his voice sincere. Thank you for giving me the chance to be their father. Emma's heart fluttered. She looked into his earnest eyes and realized that the pain and hurt from the past weren't as heavy as before. A few weeks later, Ethan invited Emma for coffee. At first, she hesitated but eventually agreed. They went back to the old cafe where they used to date, a place filled with beautiful memories of first love. They sat across from each other, no longer cold and guarded as before. Ethan opened up about the struggles he faced when he realized his mistakes, the regret he felt when he discovered all the precious moments he had missed in his children's lives. He spoke of his transformation, how he learned to love and sacrifice for his family. Emma listened quietly, her eyes softening as she saw the sincerity in every word. She realized that he truly had changed, that he was no longer the selfish and ambitious man from before. After a moment of silence, Ethan looked directly into her eyes, his voice trembling. "Emma, I know I hurt you deeply. I don't expect you to forgive me easily, but I want to ask for a chance to make things right and start over." Emma's heart raced, but she kept her composure. "Why do you want to come back? You have everything you once wanted." Ethan smiled sadly, his eyes filled with remorse. "I used to think fame and wealth were everything. But when I lost you and the kids, I realized none of that mattered. I lost my family, the most important thing in my life. I want to rebuild our family, not out of obligation but out of love." Emma's eyes welled up with tears as she recognized the truth in his words. She had convinced herself that she didn't need him, that she could live well without him. But deep in her heart, she still loved him and wanted a complete family for her children. After that conversation, Emma didn't immediately accept Ethan back into her life, but she began to open her heart. She allowed him to be more present in her life and the children's lives. They went on family outings together, attended school meetings, and prepared warm, cozy family meals. Laughter and happiness gradually returned to Emma's small house. One evening, as they sat together as a family, Mia climbed into Ethan's lap, her innocent eyes wide with curiosity. "Daddy, will you always be with us?" Ethan looked at Emma, their eyes meeting in an emotional moment. He smiled, hugging Mia tightly. "Yes, Mia. I'll always be here. I'll never leave you again. I promise." Emma smiled, her eyes shimmering with happiness as she witnessed the genuine love Ethan had for their children. She realized that they couldn't change the past, but they could build a better future together. Years later, as the children grew older, Ethan and Emma looked back on the journey they had taken together. They had overcome so much pain, suffering, and loss, but in the end, love and forgiveness had helped them rebuild their family. Ethan truly became a devoted father, a loving husband, and a responsible man. Emma learned to forgive and opened her heart to love and happiness once more. They walked forward together, not in perfection but with sincerity and unconditional love. They had found a second chance at love, and this time, they wouldn't let it slip away.